Welcome to the Braver Women Show. I'm Leanne C. Jones. I'm a therapist and the founder of Braver Women. I teach anxious LGBTQ plus women all over the globe how to stop feeling scared and start showing up courageously with more impact and power. Every episode of the Braver Women podcast is packed with proven actionable strategies and thought-provoking content from a therapeutic perspective that you can implement now. So if you're an LGBTQ plus woman ready to stop letting your emotions run the show, struggling with anxiety, or feeling like you're not enough, this is where we're going to change that. Plus, you'll hear powerful success stories from women in the Braver Breakthrough program, real stories from women who've struggled with everything from self-doubt to coming out and have made massive shifts in their lives, living authentically, following their work with me. Hey, how many times have you promised yourself that this year will be different, but somehow nothing really changes? You know the drill. Reading self-help books, watching all the gurus on YouTube, binging free content, hoping for that spark of inspiration to hear something to help you finally break free. But somehow you end up right back where you started, same habits, same distractions, same you. And it could be that you don't really know why you're stuck. And you're hoping that you'll be a bit more motivated this year to get you going. But somehow every year around the middle or end of January, you're back doing what you've always done. And it's been this way for a while now. Does that sound familiar? If it does, stick around because this episode is exactly what you need to help you switch things up this year, but in a realistic way from a therapeutic perspective. Because the truth is your current results in your life are a measure of your habits, and your habits are a measure of what's taking place inside of you on a deeper level. If you want to change, then that's where we need to start. Now, if you're after quick fixes, then this is an early heads up. I don't do quick fixes. You're not going to find them here. But if you are ready to do the work, if you're ready to wade in and get to the good stuff, then you're in exactly the right place. This is going to be a hugely powerful episode and one that I hope that you come back to listen to throughout the year. I've packed it tight from beginning all the way through to the end with solid, actionable tips and potentially life-changing advice that you're unlikely to get anywhere else on a free, unpaid podcast. So this is my gift from me to you to start your year right. Let's get going with this then. So I hope your year is off to a steady start. And if not, there's plenty of time to turn it around. This episode is really going to help you today. Now, I don't know about you, but the whole new year, new me thing, it feels a bit like a social stampede, doesn't it? Pressure to find something to focus on, pressure to create a goal or a resolution. And this is why I've hung back releasing this episode, just to let you recover from all of that a little, because I want you to digest this episode from a calm and informed place. Now all of that new year, new me hype has died down. And I totally resisted the urge to throw out new year, new me and goals content out there on my platforms, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is way deeper than simply making resolutions or setting goals. And I want this episode to be just like episode 4 that I did in December, something that you can dive back into for your own development, not just for the season. In fact, this episode, I would say, is the prerequisite to goal setting or change, because here's the thing. You can't make changes on the outside and in your life if you're doing battle with yourself on the inside. I've put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into this episode for you because I really want you to understand some key concepts to help you. And you may be surprised to know that we're not starting with goals, because goals help you aim, but your internal system, the habits, the routines, and the emotional patterns that you rely on, that's the thing that determines whether you actually get there to the goal. Goals are like the destination on a map, but your internal system is the vehicle that moves you forward. So you can set as many goals as you like, but if your engine, your daily actions, attitude and mindset isn't running well, then you're going to stall out. your internal system, this is the thing that I'm most focused on. This is how you respond, how you act, how you stay consistent. This is the thing that's going to drive you forward. And the one thing that's stopping you, if you're doing battle with that, is your emotional history. The way you approach goals, handle setbacks, or stay motivated is deeply influenced by past experiences. That's what I mean when I talk about emotional history, past experiences and the emotional patterns that you've built over time. This is the thing that I want to get you to look at, because it's the very thing that's running the show for you in your life right now. And everybody gets hyped, don't they? Because January feels like a clean slate. The start of the year feels like something magical is going to happen when the calendar flips. And hey, you know what? It really can, but only if you set yourself up properly. Before you focus on goals or changes, I'm going to help you get a bit closer to creating a climate inside of you and outside of you where you can begin to access your locus of control, so that change comes from a deeper place, a much deeper place of you fully understanding what and why you're doing what you choose to do, and to recognize where you are in the process of behavior change. And so just to explain that term, if you're not familiar, locus of control, this is a really important term, which is one of the foundational things that I cover with my clients. What it means in therapy terms is whether you believe you can influence what happens by you in your life, or whether you think that everything just happens to you and it's down to outside forces. Essentially, am I doing life, or is life doing me? And the thing is, the start of the year gives us a rare moment, doesn't it? We pause, we reflect, we think about how we feel and where we're at in our lives. And you might notice that you've perhaps got a half-completed journal that you began to write a few things down in last year, or feel compelled to create yet another bucket list of things that you must accomplish to make you feel like you're measuring up in your life. But here's the hard truth. If nothing changes, nothing changes. We can talk about it, think about it, or write it down until the cows come home. But if you don't actually do anything with those reflections in a meaningful way, or take actions to support yourself to be able to reach those goals, and hey, if you're not ready, that's okay too, by the way. But the truth is, you'll know exactly how this year will go, like the same as last year. Same patterns, same frustrations, all getting in the way. The same diluted version of you, the you that you know isn't reaching your full potential, just on repeat. So today, I'm going to help you start working with yourself and your relationship with change differently, so that you can become it, welcome it into your life, and alter your current trajectory. I'll show you where you are in the change process, even if it feels like you haven't started yet. We'll unpack what's been holding you back, what to focus on, and how to develop a system that's focused on you and your patterns as an individual. I'm even going to give you a walkthrough on how the brain works and what's going on underneath the surface for you. If you're one of those women who are caught in a perpetual cycle of start, stop, before you eventually just default back to your old ways of being. So you might want to grab a pen and take some notes for this episode, because I'm giving you a ton of good stuff today, including 8 deep self-inquiry questions to ask yourself. Now, these questions I've designed to help you as a queer woman reveal some of your emotional patterns that are keeping you stuck. Answering these are going to give you some real powerful emotional awareness for change. How to understand your style of motivation and what's really at play. I'm going to help you also to identify where you are, exactly where you are in the change process. Plus, a simple but powerful hypnotic way to shift your emotional state anytime, anywhere, so that you can start to elicit the emotional responses that align with your motivation style to get you a bit further forward in the 6 stages of change. And just when you thought that was it, as well as a generous dose of tips and advice all the way through, at the end, I'm also going to finish with helping you to ask yourself the right why questions for setting a goal, to bring all of the elements that I'm going to talk to you about today together. So if that sounds good, let's get started. And I'm going to start here and talk to you about change and help you recognize how not only are you built for it as a human being, whether you want it or not, but how you've got to approach it in a more self-supporting way if you want it to last. I've always found that you either choose your growth or growth chooses you, a bit like not tending to a garden. Eventually the weeds start to grow and emerge alongside the already planted flowers. Now, people crave positive change. We all want to feel like we're evolving in our lives for the better. And the new year feels like the time to go all in on that. I absolutely get it. And whether we like it or not, the only certainty that we have in our life is that circumstances, things, and people are constantly changing, including ourselves. When we accept that change is inevitable, we can find freedom in knowing that we don't have to stay stuck in old patterns or situations. We either get a say and work on something to improve the quality of our lives, or we become changed by inaction. The challenge, of course, is learning to navigate that change, and especially when it feels really uncomfortable. I'm an expert at facilitating change with my clients, and of course, I know that if changing human behavior was as simple as transitioning from the seasons or like going from day to night, I wouldn't need to do the work that I do each day as a therapist. Everyone will just go out there and do what they want to do with their lives. Think about it, right? Even nature struggles with change, and we can learn a lot about change and our own fragility with change as human beings if we just stop and reflect on the world around us and take a breath to look at the fragility of nature and what we're surrounded by. We don't experience the seasons in the same way anymore, do we? Climate change has caused a huge disruption in our world, and the environment wherever you are is now constantly evolving and changing. We're losing nature in favor of urbanization. Animals are going extinct, not to mention the pandemic. And my point is, we are nature. Human beings are a part of that change in nature. Think about the constant symbiotic relationship we have with change in this planet we live on. When nature changes, it affects us as human beings. And when human beings change their habits or patterns, it too has an impact on nature and on the planet. I think we forget this sometimes with modern tech the way it is. With so much change in convenience and automation happening, we as a human race are almost being forced to adapt and change whether we want to or not, or even, face the prospect of just getting left behind. The pressure we're being put under to keep up for all of us as a human race to continue to evolve and change can either be exhausting and damaging, or it can be liberating and transformative. So pain is the ultimate agent of change, not just for humans, but for nature too. And just like nature reacts to its fragile limitations, our fragility as human beings comes from our own biological and emotional limitations. Just as nature has the capacity to heal and adapt, the reassuring thing for you to know when it comes to your own personal change, when you take the time to properly acknowledge your human fragility as your starting place, it means that just like nature, your growth, even in painful times, is still possible, more than possible. In fact, it's a powerful motivator, and the thing that turns the key in the door. It's going to be messy, it's going to be vulnerable, and it's going to be scary at times and subject to setbacks. That's what true change is all about. How you adapt, take control, and grow, and get to understand your own fragile ecosystem, not the end result. But it's the very process and the lessons that we learn along the way. That's what creates wisdom. And that wisdom can be recycled again and again and again and used for you to continue to evolve and to help others around you. But here's the thing that just isn't promoted properly, in my opinion. because it doesn't fit with a quick fix, quick sale, quick high interest of instant gratification that human beings are constantly being conditioned to expect. Before you can begin to make any meaningful change in your life, you need to plant 4 internal supporting mechanisms within your personal ecosystem. Otherwise, you're just going to be painting over cracks. And I see these as the soil of self-concept, how you see yourself, self-compassion, patience, time, and consistency. You need these 4 things for any change that you make to effectively take root, because banging away, chasing after something through fear and the avoidance of pain alone is going to be the very thing that leads you into a spiral of overwhelm and then avoidance before you then just default back right to where you were. And although this doesn't sound as sexy as swinging through the rafters, talking about reaching new heights with goals, what I prioritize on is teaching you reality over instant gratification. It's the inside out approach that has the most power for you. Let me give you an example. Instead of thinking about goals, think about who you need to become to reach those goals. Saying, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that keeps you in a cycle of waiting. The real change is just out of reach. That's what it feels like, because doing is very different to being. But when you begin to say, I am capable of this, I am becoming a person who is, or who values courage over confidence, you take ownership right now. It's no longer something that sits outside of you that you're working towards. You instead open up and widen your self-concept and let it become part of who you are now. I'm going to come on to this in a bit more detail in a moment, but for now, if you don't see yourself as somebody who embodies and truly values what you want, you'll be forever chasing it. It feels like, and it will continue to feel like, acting rather than something that's intrinsic within you. So rather than referring to your goals as something that's outside of you and a long way in the distance, you need to embody it. You need to value it. You need to bring it into your sense of identity already. So it could sound something like, rather than I want to work on my self-esteem. That feels out of reach, doesn't it? What it really needs to be for you to be more congruent with this is, because I'm someone who values my self-esteem, and this is why I'm going to be doing X, Y, or Z every day, talking to myself supportively or relating to myself with others in a respectful way. When you do this, that shift of how you relate to a goal, when you bring it into who you already are and what you value, that shift rewires how you move through the world. You stop acting like someone chasing change and start showing up as someone who already embodies it. The sooner you make that internal shift, the sooner your actions catch up. And that's where the lasting change really starts. Most of my clients who will be listening to this podcast, they will know all too well that familiar phrase I say to them all the time: how you see yourself determines how you be yourself. You can tell what someone values and what's important to them by listening to what they say and watching what they do consistently. A true, authentic, long-term success isn't about reaching a milestone or goal. I'll reach that goal and then I'll be happy. That's very short-lived. It's about the process you cultivate inside of you. Write this down. It's about the process that you cultivate inside of you as a result of going after that goal. The framework, the system, the pathway. When you firstly prioritize your internal environment through the scope of this self-concept, and you start to adjust your self-concept to align with what it is that you want, combined with a healthy dose of compassion, patience, time, and consistency with those actions that align to that self-concept, you're more likely to create space inside of yourself and open yourself out to actually make room to try new things. Let yourself take more risks, experiments, micro experiments, for example, make mistakes and stay grounded. without emotionally beating yourself into it, because fear, pain, and self-compassion, then they're not opposites. They work together. Think about it, right? Fear and pain challenges us to evolve and make changes, and self-compassion will be the very thing that keeps you grounded. It's not a goal that will change you. Yeah, it'll give you a sense of accomplishment at the end. But then what? Then what do you do? But creating that shift in your inner environment with your self-concept is where goals become not something that you do, but something that you are. When there's a kind of warm, friendly, and supportive voice in your head that encourages you, lets you have another go, and lets you imagine some new possibilities about who you really are, but doesn't let you off the hook at the same time, that is the type of stable ecosystem that I'm talking about. One where you can grow deep, supportive roots for long-term change and actually enjoy the process rather than seeing it as a chore, with it being all stick and no carrot with yourself. So think about that as your very first tip for creating change, is your self-concept, your identity, how you see yourself, and how you be yourself, how those two align with each other. Those supportive roots of a nurturing environment, these are the very things that you need to cultivate within you before any changes can be made. So let's take a look at the next thing, which is absolutely key. And these are your beliefs and your neural coding. This is what's at play for you. This is why you come up against yourself, where your conscious mind, you consciously want to go after something, but you're battling on the inside, and you find yourself falling short when you go to take actions, or you lack that discipline, or you don't have enough internal resources to maintain that consistency. So let's go another layer deeper and talk about now where you are, why change can feel really hard, and what's really going on. Because again, this is the next unsexy fact, but nonetheless something that you need to know. In any change, it's actually you versus your emotional history. But it's never sold that way by the wellness industry, is it? The wellness industry often sells surface level change like it's a quick fix, a one size fits all solution, or like it's something that should just happen instantly. And it is very surface level. And I think it's easy to feel like a failure when the surface level fixes don't work, because the reason for that is got nothing to do with you. It's what you've not addressed within you, the deeper emotional patterns that have been in place for so long. You see, true change, it takes time, and it's not about a quick turnaround. It's about really understanding and reworking your own unique emotional history. That's what's guiding your current habitual reactions and your habitual decisions. And that's where we're really going to get into this conversation. So talking about deep-seated limiting ideas and beliefs and concepts within, and the relationship with surface level change. You see, many queer women might come out to friends, family, or colleagues to begin to live more authentically. But if their internal fears or insecurities aren't addressed, like the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment or judgment, even though coming out is monumental, believe it or not, this can just be a surface level change. They may still hold on to the same negative self-concept or limiting ideas about themselves, or struggle with self-acceptance and shame, even though they've revealed their identity to others. Even though they've been out for many, many years. Nearly all my clients who've been out for years, some in their 50s and 60s, only start to recognize that once we start digging into what's underneath some of the deeper and more dormant layers that are running the show in their emotional lives. So what really is behind effective change? Well, it's about self-understanding, even if it feels a bit scary and vulnerable at first. And it's also about shifting the deep-rooted patterns and habitual beliefs that drive your current habitual behaviors. When you deeply understand yourself, your emotions, your triggers, your needs, values, and your patterns, you can create changes that are authentically rooted in who you truly are and how you want to show up in the world rather than in external pressures or quick one-size-fits-all fixes. So speaking of going deep, before I give you the 8 questions to cultivate your own awareness of your unique habitual emotional patterns, I want to teach you what's really going on underneath the surface on the inside for you, deep within your personal ecosystem. How familiar does this sound? I want to change, but it feels too hard. I've tried everything, or when I try, it just doesn't work, and I go back to what I was doing at the start. Now, for many years, that was me. I used to believe that everything around me needed to change so that I could feel better. I didn't think it was my responsibility. I wanted those who had hurt me to take responsibility first. I pointed fingers. I blamed people. I blamed my circumstances. I blamed those who'd hurt me. I got angry and stubborn, all of that stuff. And I went all the way through to being apathetic and depressed because I felt hurt. Now, not only did I feel hurt, I also felt stuck and powerless, and I had no locus of control. And I believed that all of this stuff at the time was happening to me. So I told myself that I was stuck and I lacked personal agency, all because I was doing the one thing that was keeping me in that place. I was using emotional reasoning as my logic. And emotional reasoning sounds like this. I feel stuck, so I must be stuck. I have to feel like I can't tolerate discomfort or pain. It feels too hard. And so this was the loop that I remained in until I learned that feelings alone were not the thing that I needed to rely on to help me change my life. And for most of my young life, I hadn't been taught how to explore who I was or to form my own opinions. That's why change can feel so hard sometimes, because if you've never been taught to be empowered or to see yourself as someone who can be powerful, feel empowered, or look at the facts outside of your feelings, not only can it feel like acting, it can feel scary to move away from that compass you've been using your whole life. It can feel unstable and sometimes a little contrived, particularly if you feel unworthy or undeserving of good things. That discomfort does not equal danger, by the way. What it equals is unfamiliarity. And that's a thing that we need to get you to change. It's really important before you go after something to understand how you hold yourself back and what the limiting idea or the emotional driving force is that's causing you to generate that false idea that leads to that emotional feeling, because that's the thing that may need to be addressed before you focus on the actual goal. If this is familiar, and I know it has been for me in the past, there's nothing wrong with you, by the way. If you've been experimenting with change and keep coming back full circle to where you started, then firstly, just like I mentioned, there's some biological concepts at play. It's called being a human being with a conditioned neural pathway or a conditioned personal ecosystem. And helpfully or unhelpfully, that's become your neural coding. But once you understand some of what I'm about to explain to you, it means that you can work with this understanding and start to work with your feelings and ideas about who you are and what you're capable of rather than against them. You see, our brains are shaped by the experiences and the people we meet throughout our lives, and this conditioning begins early. Even before we have the words to explain it, the process is driven by 2 key factors: deeply felt emotions being the first one, and secondly, repeated experiences. From birth and even in the pre-verbal stage, this conditioning is reinforced by 3 powerful forces. Number 1, fear. 2, the desire to avoid pain. And 3, the pursuit of pleasure. Fear can stem from authority figures, the threat of harm, or the need to avoid consequences. While pain avoidance and the search for comfort and reward, that plays a crucial role in shaping behavior. Now, although this isn't the full picture of human development, these drivers massively influence how we learn to navigate the world, often long before we consciously recognize them. These are what we call emotional histories, the thing that I've been talking about all the way through this podcast so far. Your emotional history is the collection of your past experiences and feelings that shape how you react to situations in the present. It includes the emotional patterns, beliefs, and stories formed and told to you over time based on past events, relationships, and personal experiences. Now, depending on your unique emotional history, that will massively influence how you see and respond to situations in the here and now, because that's what you're really battling with when it comes to trying to instigate behavioral and thought change to get you moving towards a goal, not the goal that you're chasing after. The goal is easy when your internal system is set up to support you. But at the moment, it's those unhelpful past experiences and ingrained responses that are shaping how you are showing up in your life right now, because your brain has digested all of this into something that it loves. Patterning. Your brain loves patterns, and from those patterns, it creates unconscious shortcuts. What we recognize as habits, things that you do automatically without much conscious thought. And the reality is most of what you do and how you respond in your life right now is less about being conscious and more about your ingrained programming. Let me give you an example to fully explain this. Let's say you had a childhood where you were often criticized or made to feel not good enough. Over time, this emotional history might create a pattern in your brain where you then just automatically respond to situations by doubting yourself, even if the current situation doesn't need it. And so you move along your timeline in your life. And let's say that you're asked to lead a team at work. Your current conscious thought might be, yes, I really want to do this. But because of your past emotional conditioning, you might habitually default to feelings of inadequacy or fear of failure. You might procrastinate, overthink, or avoid the task, even though you're actually fully capable of completing it. You're just not believing that you can, so then you don't feel like you can, and so then you don't. This automatic response, in this case, procrastination or avoidance, is a habit that was formed from your emotional history. It's not necessarily a conscious choice, but a pattern that your brain has learned over time. In essence, you need to understand that your past emotional experiences set the stage for your automatic habits that influence how you react in the present, often without you even realizing it. The habit that you're dealing with right now, it just didn't pop out of nowhere. It's not some random thing that snuck into your life. You probably have a good sense of what it is that you want to stop, but more importantly, you might not actually know at this stage what it's linked to. I've had women say to me before our work together, I don't know if I can change, or I know I want to, but I just feel stuck, or I'm scared of changing. And the reason for this is they can't make sense of what they're feeling, because what's happening on the inside is that they're carrying a hurt and wounded child essentially in an adult's body. Over the years, they've constructed inaccurate thoughts or stories and attributed them to certain sensations, often stemming from their childhood, their emotional histories. For example, they might feel anxiety in social situations and think, well, this means that I'm not safe or accepted. But it's purely a narrative that's based on past experiences. Maybe they were bullied, put down, or deeply criticized growing up. These stories and distorted meanings trap them in old patterns. But when they start to break down and reframe those sensations, understanding where they come from, why they're there, and replacing them with a more accurate reflection of their current reality, they can begin to start to shift. So what's really happening is like running two screens at once on the inside. And on one side, the rational mind knows that there's no actual threat. But the emotional mind, driven by this old conditioning that we're talking about here, is still sounding alarms in the body. And in psychology, this is referred to as emotional dissonance. And this is where the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, and the amygdala, your emotional brain, aren't in sync. The amygdala doesn't deal with in logic. It only knows what it feels and it reacts accordingly. And so the more you react in the same way, the deeper those patterns are encoded. These sensations don't mean I'm boring or I'm not enough. They mean I learned to believe this because my family ignored me. The shift happens when you realize that not everyone will respond to you like your family did, and that gives you room to experiment. I want to highlight this because it's critical. Your brain's primary function is survival. Its job is to trigger uncomfortable chemical responses that push you to take quick action. It doesn't care about your happiness, and it certainly doesn't care about how you feel. What it does care about is the pattern of matching emotions to actions. That's why avoidance, people-pleasing, or seeking reassurance often become default behaviors. They follow the story that you've attached to the feeling. Now, here's the important part. The fear center of your brain, the amygdala, works like an algorithm. I say this to my clients all the time, and it doesn't differentiate between emotional wounds from the past and real threats in the present. The more you respond in the same way, the stronger that pattern becomes. These experiences are categorized alongside the original sensitizing event, often below the surface of conscious awareness. Psychology calls this emotional patterning. When it comes to change, you need time, consistency, patience, and repetition, because you're not just trying to change a habit. You're actually working to retrain one of the most primal systems in your body. And this is what I call reteaching the algorithm. In therapy, my role isn't about helping you to stop the amygdala, that fear center in your brain, to be triggered. That's just not realistic. Instead, it's about teaching you how to notice the response when it happens and you get those surge of chemicals, and that creates a feeling, and slowly retrain your brain by retraining your current responses to your feelings. The goal is for you to shift those automatic, well-trodden pathways and replace them with healthier and more adaptive patterns. So when that feelings alarm does go off, when that emotional brain is activated or what you recognize as being triggered, you can start to respond differently, not out of an old fear or expectation of old consequences, but from the more grounded part of you that logically knows that you're safe now. So what I've done is I've thought about this, and I thought, how can I get you to start to recognize some of your emotional patterns? And how can I help you to look at these with a bit more awareness and compassion? So I'm going to give you your questions that I promised, these deep self-exploration questions that are designed to prompt you into inquiring around your emotional patterns. So go and grab a pen and start to write these down, because they're going to really help you. So the first question is, what sensations or emotions come up repeatedly in certain situations? And so in social settings, relationships, or moments of conflict, really, this is about getting you to notice what emotions consistently show up. Is there a familiar emotional flavor that resurfaces again and again? And explore how these emotions might be linked to your experiences with your sexuality, for example, or things that you have learned in the past. So the second question is, when you feel emotional discomfort or anxiety, what's the first thought or story that runs through your mind about yourself or the situation? And this is about getting you to pay attention to the automatic narrative that follows your emotions. Is it a thought related to self-doubt, fear of rejection, or worry about not being enough? And I want you to consider this narrative and how these stories are connected to your sexual identity or your past experiences. And thirdly, can you recall a time from your past that feels connected to the way that you're feeling now? I want you to think back to those moments in childhood, school, or earlier relationships where this feeling first appeared. How might this memory relate to your sexual or gender identity, and what emotions did you associate with it? And number 4, how do you typically respond when uncomfortable feelings show up? When discomfort arises, do you avoid the situation? Do you seek reassurance from others, or overextend yourself to make others comfortable? This is about helping you to explore your coping patterns, like people-pleasing or shutting down, and it may be influenced by experiences with sexuality and acceptance. And number 5, if this feeling could speak, what would it say about you? This is about where you give the emotion a voice and listen to its message. What beliefs or self-perceptions does this emotion carry? Does it, for example, reflect feelings of shame, self-doubt, or fear about your sexuality or being accepted as you are? And number 6, what parts of you feel unseen or unheard, either by others or yourself? And this is about getting you to inquire into other aspects of your identity, particularly your sexuality, that you feel are hidden or not fully expressed. Explore where you might be minimizing your needs or silencing parts of yourself. And number 7, when you imagine stepping out of this emotional pattern, what fears or what ifs immediately surface? This is about getting you to notice any resistance or fears that arise when you think about breaking free from these frequent emotional patterns. Is there a fear of judgment, rejection, or being unlovable? And number 8, is there a younger version of you that still feels stuck in this emotional loop? This is about, I want you to reflect on younger versions of yourself who may have first experienced these emotions, especially around your sexuality or identity. And it's about getting you to, how would you comfort or respond to them differently today with compassion and understanding? So there's your 8 questions. And after you've reflected, it's important to ask yourself, do I actually want to do something about it, or am I content to leave things as they are for now? And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. Sometimes we're ready to make moves and other times we're not there yet, and that's okay. And if that's the case, a question I've always pondered, if that's the case, do we really have to actively drive change, or do things just get easier if we let them be? And I think the short answer to this is yes, because the truth is, like I started when I opened up this podcast, we're always changing, whether we like it or not. There's no avoiding it. It's life versus time, and time always wins. The thing is, time has a funny way of showing us patterns that we couldn't see before. It softens the edges of our pain. It gives us space to grow, but it also holds up a mirror. And that's where the real question comes in. How are you evolving? And if you don't have a say, then what is your trajectory? And I think the key to this is to check in with yourself and be real about it. If you go through these questions honestly and have the courage to experience a bit of pain, then I promise you, you will unleash a surge of energy, because most people are more driven by the pain of potentially losing something or missing out or being overlooked, rather than the pleasure of potentially gaining something. And the key difference with starting from this place that I advocate, from the inside out, from the deep work on the inside before going after a goal, is the conscious self-awareness part. It's not just changing for changing's sake or doing what everybody else is doing and feeling like you've got to get on board or jump on the bandwagon. It's like switching on a light in a dark room inside of yourself. When you do that, you start to allow yourself to see what you've been doing all along. But in order for you to be 100% honest with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror and admit that something isn't good enough in your life. It requires a massive amount of courage to do that. You have to be willing to endure that pain. And most people are afraid to. Most people would rather lie to themselves and say, hey, listen, everything's okay. My life's fine. It's not that bad yet. When it really isn't. They'd rather spend money on retail or holidays to numb out and forget than ever fully invest in themselves. And truthfully, it's just an excuse and a way for people to soften things as a way of avoiding experiencing that pain. And I know this because I've been there and I couldn't outrun myself. It was like being in a relay race with myself. Every time I thought I'd be passing the baton, I'd end up circumnavigating another layer of myself that I was trying to outrun. And what I'm saying to you is, if you could find a way to get to the truth within you, you and it, you can change anything in your life. But you need that radical honesty and this understanding and this deep self-inspection. That's what I've been talking about so far. If you're able to do that, that radical honesty will give you the impetus to start to create change. And so a useful way to see where you are in the cycle of change is to understand it. Now, the model that I'm going to talk to you about is widely used in psychology, and I've adapted it to make it a bit more relatable for you, but it's going to give you a pretty good idea as to where you really are. And even if you're just listening to this podcast and you're thinking, well, I haven't thought of any goals yet, or there's something on the periphery that I haven't given much thought to, this is especially for you. You are included in this model because the first stage of any change process is pre-contemplation. This is, I'm not seeing it yet. And at this point, you're not even thinking about change. Maybe you're not aware of the issue, or you're just avoiding it because facing it feels a bit too much. It's easier to stay stuck and pretend that everything's fine. You might be telling yourself, well, I don't see what the problem is, or I'm fine the way I am. Now, the key to moving forward here is awareness. You cannot change something that you don't see. So my advice here is to sit with that discomfort. Let it hit you in the face until you can't ignore it any longer. Next is contemplation. This is the next phase of the change process. And it sounds like this. I know something needs to change. This is where you start to feel the weight of it. You can see that something's off. You can feel that something's off, but you haven't taken the leap to act yet. And it's that endless cycle of thinking about doing something, but never following through. And you might think, well, I know I need to change, but I'm not ready, or I'll deal with this later. So the key here, the key to moving forward, if you're finding yourself in this particular phase of contemplation, is clarity. Get clear on what's holding you back. Is it fear? Fear of failure? Is it overwhelm? What kind of fear? Break those fears down into really like a granular form. I had a client sit in front of me 6 to 8 months ago, and she wanted to go to the gym. And the whole reason why she hadn't taken action is because when we broke it down, what she was really afraid of is being in the gym and being overweight and worrying about what people might think of her. But she hadn't taken the time to register that in herself. She kept avoiding that and just going back and forth in her mind. So when you get clear on what it is that you are holding back from, what the fear is, then you can see exactly what's stopping you from moving forward. And so the next part of the change process is preparation. Preparation is When you get to preparation, it's like, I'm almost there. You're starting to make moves. And most of my clients, by the time they come for a consultation with me, find themselves in the preparation phase. So small moves, no matter how small they are moves. So it could be gathering information, trying things out, or even setting small goals. And there's a bit of energy about this phase, but also some nervousness mixed with some excitement. And you might tell yourself, well, I can't keep doing this. I'm ready to make the shift. And what I want to say to you, the key to moving forward here, if you are in this phase and you recognize it, is planning. Stop thinking and start doing. When you get a solid plan and structure, they are your best friends here. Get clear on the steps so it's no longer just an idea, but something that you're actively working towards. And so the next phase is action. This is I'm in it. It's where you become fully immersed in the process. You're actively making changes, whether it's in your habits, your boundaries, or how you show up in your life. And it's uncomfortable. It's a bit messy, but you're actually in it and you're doing it and you're making the most of it. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I'm doing it, but it's really tough, or it's working, but I'm scared I'll mess up. And the key here is consistency. It's not about perfection. I say this to my clients all the time. I don't want perfection. I just want you to turn the needle 1% every day. 1%. That's all it takes. Because that feels so less overwhelming when you look at it like that. Tiny, tiny micro steps. And it's about showing up each day, even when it's hard. Small steps keep building the foundation, and that's what matters. And so once you've made progress, you move into maintenance. This is the next phase. This is about staying strong. The changes that you've made are starting to stick, but you know that slipping back into old habits is always a possibility. And it's about getting you to hold steady. And you might say, well, this feels a bit more natural now. I've incorporated it more into my life. It feels like I am being, how I see myself is now naturally moving into how I'm being myself. And that consistency of I'm actually just not going back to where I was. And the key to maintaining that momentum is reinforcement. You need to keep reminding yourself of why you've started. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. This is about celebrating your wins and your progress. This is something I massively encourage in the client support group. Because it doesn't matter how small your progress is, it's important to recognize it and stay vigilant because you've come a long way. And when you start documenting your wins and your progress, then it means that you can start to see the journey that you've been on. And that should serve as motivation to not want to go back to square one. And finally, in the change process, psychology recognizes that there's relapse. And this is, I've hit a bump because it happens to everyone. I remember when I moved out of where I was living to a very rural area. And so going for a run for me was very difficult. I was running half marathons. And as soon as I had a change of environment, I couldn't access roads to safely run on. And I had a massive relapse. And so this is about recognizing that you're infallible. You're not a robot. And something within your journey of change will happen and to cause you to go into this place. And I say to my clients all the time, expect relapses, expect falling down. It's the getting back up that's the most important part. It's not about beating yourself up because you've fallen off the wagon. Because I don't want you to confuse relapse with failure. It's a bump in the road. It's not the end of the journey. And you might be thinking, well, I messed up, but it's okay. I want you to think that. It doesn't mean that I can't do it. Just because you fall off doesn't mean that you can't get back up. You absolutely can when you are doing all the things that I've talked about so far in this podcast, particularly with the opening part around fostering that ecosystem within you that's supportive and kind. And this is where The key here is self-compassion. This is about dusting yourself off and getting back in the game, because if you're able to do that, that's where real growth happens. You can learn from the slip up and keep pushing forward. And ultimately, the pace of change depends on consistency. It depends on self-awareness. It depends on support around you and your own readiness, because change is not a linear process. You don't go from A to B, from B to C, all the way to Z. It is a process with ups and downs and growth. But if you have the right tools and the right attitude, it can be deeply transformative. And in my therapy practice, I focus on all of the things that I've talked to you about. I focus on self-concept. That's one of the first things that we look at. Are what are the ideas that are holding you back right now? Because those ideas will also elicit the fears and some of those repetitive patterns that are happening because they are believing that these ideas and beliefs. The next thing I focus on in my practice is environment. You have to be around people who are going to support you. You have to be in an environment where you are part of a tribe, and it almost transforms like your personal quest into a shared one. And this is why I have a client support group, because it means that you are not on your own. And at the start, your self-concept was very much singular. I'm on my own doing this. But when you're part of a group, or you're part of an environment where people have shared goals, then you are very much part of something. And that shift in your identity can be really quite powerful as well. And I have lots of women in my client group saying, we're braver women. That's how they identify. We're braver women. And they come in, some of them have been on solo holidays, some of them have worked through something really quite transformative, but they're all showing up and sharing and supporting each other. And it means that their growth and their change is like no longer an individual pursuit. It means that they're part of something bigger. And this is why I get them to remain in the group when they finish working with me, because I think that group support and that environment is crucial to the maintenance phase. And it's friendship and community that can continue to embed that new identity that will really help these new behaviors last in the long run. And so this leads nicely on to the next thing that I focus on, the next concept to support the change process with all my clients. So from the environment, moving on to accountability. And it's something that I do every day with my clients. There's nothing worse than going through a change process. And I talk about this in my most recently published YouTube video. When you go through a change process, it means that when you are being held accountable and you've got to show up, that there's no place to hide. There's no get out clause. It means that you know what you are supposed to do, and you've got to show up with some sort of a result. And I think this is the key thing that makes braver women far more different to traditional therapy and coaching, is that I don't expect people to be left to their own devices. I don't expect the women that work with me to be left to their own devices outside of big sessions, particularly when we are uncovering patterns of behavior and thought that really need action and change to be able to see that result. Because when we're not being observed, when we're not being watched, when we're not being monitored, number one, it can feel quite demotivating. And number two, when we're not being monitored, guess what happens? We go back to our default settings because there's nobody who is paying attention to us. And I think that's really, really important. So if you are embarking on some change, some ideas could be announcing on your social media platforms what you intend to do and when you intend to do it by, and posting pictures and getting some support from your friends to keep you accountable. That could be a really nice idea. But I want to give you a tip which is really important, because I see this a lot, particularly within therapy groups and within my own groups, actually, for things to focus on and setting goals. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is emotions being set as goals. And I want to say to you, don't set emotions as goals. Practice the actions that lead to the opportunity to experience those emotions. And I hear this all the time during consultations. I just want to be happy. I just want to stop feeling anxious. I want to feel confident. And that's all well and good. But here's the issue. Emotions are not goals because they are reactions to our experiences. They're not outcomes that we can control or achieve through intention alone. Goals, on the other hand, are actionable, specific, and often measurable, and they involve concrete steps towards a desired outcome, while emotions are very fluid and often beyond our direct control. So here's the thing. You can set a goal such as improving your self-esteem. I see this a lot. I want to work on my self-esteem. I want to work on my confidence. So you can set a goal such as improving confidence or self-esteem. The two are very different, but let's just go with self-esteem. But the emotions tied to that goal, like feeling worthy or confident, are more of a byproduct of the actions you take towards that goal, not the goal itself. And when I teach my clients exactly how to make shifts with their responses to, let's say, uncertainty, after a few weeks, what I hear is, Leanne, I haven't had any what if questions lately. And I've noticed, actually, I haven't had many for a few days. And I feel way more in control and confident as a result of this. Another example, let's say your goal is to feel more confident in social situations, but if your primary focus is on the emotion of confidence, it's going to feel out of reach. Confidence is not something that you can force or demand. Instead, focus on the actions that lead to the feeling of confidence, like treat them as practice rounds and decide on, well, today I'm going to practice using open body language. I'm going to use hand gestures when I speak. I'm going to practice speaking clearly and slowly. So understanding that emotions are a natural part of your human experience, but they're not something that you can set as a destination. If you make feeling a certain way your goal, it can set you up for frustration because emotions often don't follow a linear set path. Instead of focusing on the end emotion, like wanting to be free of anxiety, wanting to feel calm, wanting to feel happy, that's another one, or worthy, it's more effective to focus on actionable steps that can create the conditions for those feelings to naturally emerge over time when you are consistent with doing those actions. So speaking about actions, and I've said this periodically throughout this show, when you focus on making tiny incremental changes, just 1% better every day, that's what really shifts the needle over time. It's not about all or nothing or going in full throttle and burning out. It's about steady progress, middle ground progress, not perfection. So you're not looking to achieve the absolute best, but you're not looking to bottom out either. What can you do in the middle? And if you're looking to form a habit, you want to be looking just to form the behavior towards that habit. So if you want to read more books, for example, then just start with reading a paragraph and then put the book down. It sounds silly, but over time, over a week, you could be reading 2 or 3 pages. And then over a month, you could be reading a chapter. And that's the thing. When you focus on small and incremental, it feels more manageable. It feels more doable. And that is the thing that gets you going. And this mindset allows you to build confidence with your own approach to your habits that can make you stick to the process rather than relying on the habit to stick to you. Small, consistent efforts that add up to that repetition and new neural pathway that you're looking to build and have that compound effect. That compound effect of the 1% will build momentum towards a transformation slowly but surely. It's about being really patient. Changing habits like your diet and exercise are monumental. And so starting down a road of complete opposites, like cutting out all the things that you like, is going to send your nervous system into a frenzy. So you need to retrain those neural pathways by starting out really, really small. So that's the next tip. By the way, you focus on 1% better just every day. So before I give you your goal setting questions, I want to talk to you about pairing up motivation with emotion. Now, most traditional coaching and therapy will focus, it will orientate you towards your why power over willpower, which, if by the way, is important. You need to know why you're setting about doing something. But as big as your why might be, words without feeling are just words. And what I mean when I say this, think about the last time you watched a film on mute with just the subtitles. If any of you are dog lovers like me, you'll likely be familiar with the film Marley and Me. It's one of the most moving and deeply upsetting movies that I've ever seen. I'm a bit of a softie like that. Where animals are concerned, I will fall into a heap. But you know what got me into that crying, snotty mess while I was watching that film? It wasn't the frames, it was the music. And it's the same as a horror movie. A horror movie, it's not the same when you press mute, is it? And that's because something remarkable happens when you make an image, you press play in your mind and imagine you doing the thing you want to change, and imagine you actually being the person who is doing all of that and becoming who you want to be, and pair it with the most moving track that you've ever listened to. What happens when you close your eyes and do that is something extraordinary. And when you do this on repeat, you create a memory, because the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real or imagined. It responds to both live and imagined stimulus in exactly the same way. And it's the very reason why music will take you back to a time or a place, whether you were experiencing something you fondly look back on or something that made you sad. Every time you listen to a track, when you get up in the morning or just before you do the thing you want to change, you're giving the most powerful emotional part of your brain the emotional buy-in, the idea of emotional movement, which is the very thing that can move you into action. Depending on whether you're listening to music that makes you feel pain at the thought of inaction, or music that makes you feel pleasure and motivated towards the doing of what you want to achieve. In either case, it will turn the needle inside of you. You will feel that. Now, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and I can tell you now that music can be a powerful hypnotic tool because it taps directly into the brain's emotional and subconscious centers, influencing mood, focus, and even physical responses. Let me tell you a bit more about it. So, music bypasses the rational thinking mind and it connects straight to the emotions. Your brain learns through feelings and rewards, and music often carries emotional memories, and this can trigger a shift in mood almost instantly, anchoring you into a different state. So this can be used for emotional encoding. And the second one is rhythm and brain waves. Now, the rhythm in music can sync with your brain waves, a phenomenon called entrainment. Slow, calming music encourages slower brain waves like alpha or theta, associated with relaxation and light hypnosis. And upbeat, faster tempos can energize and activate beta brain waves, which is linked to focus and alertness. And repetitive melodies, you can alter your focus and state by listening to repetitive melodies and rhythms. It can induce like a trance-like state, much like guided meditation or hypnosis. And it really helps to quiet the conscious mind and opens the door to the subconscious, making it much easier to influence thought patterns, beliefs, or habits. And it's like listening to music and allowing yourself to daydream. That's what this is about. This is what it induces. And it's when you do that, you are in your own private hypnotic state. It also influences pattern interruption. This is key. If you're stuck in a loop of anxious or negative thoughts, I like to call those negative thoughts shit FM. Music can interrupt that pattern because it engages your senses, and music changes that emotional backdrop. It helps you shift your focus and calm any racing thoughts. And also, it can change the physical response as well. Listening to certain types of music releases dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, the brain's feel-good chemicals, and it can lower cortisol, that stress hormone, and trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the brakes on your nervous system, which will promote relaxation. So I'd love for you to try that. And I've had some clients do it before, and they come to me when I give them certain pattern corrections to work on each day. And for those that I've said, try this listening to music just for 3 to 5 minutes. That's the average time span of a track, and notice how you feel. Now, I've done this with hundreds of clients, and I've not had any of them come back to me and say that they haven't noticed an internal shift by applying this. So what they want to focus on, just using that visualization, seeing it very clearly and vividly in their mind, imagining them doing that and how it will be when they get the thing that they're aiming for. And pair that with music that can be truly moving for you on the inside. So it's all very well saying you want to do something, but if you want to get really motivated and you want to be moved by that goal, pair your goal, put it in your mind, use your imagination, close your eyes open or eyes closed, and listen to a very, very moving track just for the duration of that track, and notice how you feel afterwards. I guarantee you, I'd love for you to let me know, but I guarantee you will notice some change on the inside. So try that. So moving on now, we're getting towards the end now. I hope you found it very useful so far. I want to talk to you about goal setting. Now, I'm going to teach you how to set a goal. And the first thing I want to say is many people think they lack motivation, but what they actually lack is clarity. It's not always obvious where and when you will take action if you're vague about it. And I hear this all the time. There's a couple of years now I've put into the Braver Women Facebook group, what are your goals and how are you going to achieve them? And I just get some of them. I get a couple of words or just a sentence, and that won't work. It won't work. So the first thing I want to say to you, if you've still got your book open or a journal, get your pen out, write this down. You've got to be really granular with your goal, because vague doesn't work. I'm going to work on is vague. It's the difference. When you get clear on and granular, what I mean when I say granular, I mean breaking it down into specifics, where, why, when, and how. When you get granular, it's the difference between a black and white image to one which is 3D and vivid in full color. I'd like to work on my self-esteem. That's one I hear all the time. Or the other one is I just want to be happy this year. This year I'm going to be happy. Well, that's a nice idea, but it's not a goal. A granular goal sounds like this. Each day I will commit to talking to myself in a more supportive way. I will commit to noticing when I'm talking down to myself and switch it to a more supportive narrative. And I'll also acknowledge some of the things that I'm really good at. I will start to acknowledge my strengths each day as much as I can, as often as I can. I'll even write them down. Each day, I will remind myself of human worth and stop comparing myself to others. I will do that each day. Each day, I will allow myself to try one new thing, and I will encourage myself with compassion and support. And so when you actually write your goal down, and you write a granular sentence also with I will, rather than I will try. Try is weak. You want to be using active language rather than I want to be or I will try. You want to be committed all in with that, the real specifics of what it is that you want to do with the prefix of I will. Each day, when, at what time, how much time are you going to focus on this? Because you're moving away from that vagueness and into that clarity. So write down your goal with the granularity that I've mentioned. And the next thing that I want you to write down are why specifically are your reasons. So here's the thing. If the reward of your goal is simply, well, I'll feel better, then that's not enough. I will feel better is optional. But when you make the reward so compelling that it's got you by the horns and you're not going to give up, that's when you can use my music tip to emotionally connect to your why a bit deeper. Think of the pain it causes you and where it will lead you if you continue on the path that you're on. So the idea of not talking down to yourself, the reward over time is to develop strong inner foundations of confidence and self-worth, strong inner foundations of self-trust, which means that you can open new doors that were previously closed, new relationships. You can take previously perceived risks. You can look at a new career, new earning potential, inner peace. You can stop chasing situations and people who made you feel scared before to be independent. You can start to develop more comfort with flying solo and more opportunities for self-explorations. The list is endless. When you nail down your why, when you sit there, write down your goal, connect to it emotionally, and nail your why, because this will be the thing that helps you to not give up when you are very, very committed to your why. And that commitment comes with feelings, not just logic. When you logic yourself into doing something, you logic yourself out of it. At the end of the day, the most powerful force within you are your emotions. And so you've got to ask yourself, how do I feel at the idea of what I'm looking to achieve? When you can connect to your emotions, that is the thing that's going to get you over the line. That is the thing that is going to make sure that your emotions are going to be the thing that helps you to commit each day to a trajectory. And you can create that pathway or that trajectory in your mind by what you choose to visualize on. If you're not a visual person, then you can use other senses to create that idea inside of you and that feeling that helps you to connect to it on a more emotional level. And lastly, when you are exploring your goal and when you're writing it down, something else that will give you a massive amount of emotional buy-in is doing this each day, whatever your goal is. Once you've written it down in the amount of detail that I've talked about, once you've realized that it's not the emotional goal that you're after, it's the actions that lead to the feeling. And once you've been able to connect to it on an emotional level with some music and some visualization or activating your other senses, the other important concept to ask yourself is, doing this each day will help me become a person who is what? And if you think about what we started the show talking about, your self-concept, this question taps into recreating your self-concept from I'm a person who would like, or I want to work on, to somebody, I am now a person who values my emotional health, my physical health. I am now a person who is committed to being sure of myself. I'm a person who is able to trust myself and the actions that follow. So I think it's really important to consider who you're going to become as a result of this particular goal. And whatever your identity is right now, you only believe it because you have proof of it. And the more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly that you will believe it. So think about your current actions. Let's say, for example, that you're a smoker or you vape, for example. And you only have proof of that because that's what you do. So because of what you do, that's who you believe you are. And so when we're looking to create shifts, one of the most powerful ways to do that is with language. And the language that we use determines our identity. So if you want to give up vaping, when you say things like, I'm trying not to vape, or I'm not vaping at the moment, or I haven't vaped in 6 months, that's not really powerful at all. But if you're trying not to vape, the most powerful way in which you can use your language to affect your beliefs and therefore affect your behavior and your sense of identity is saying, no thanks, I don't vape. I'm not a vapor. And the more that you can get certain on who you want to become, the likelihood is that the behaviors and the actions that you want to take that are aligned with that new self-concept or that sense of identity, they will feel a lot more congruent when you make that internal shift about who you think you are and what you can now let go of doing as a result. So that brings us to the end of the episode, and I hope that you found it packed full of useful tips and advice to help you move forward this year and to make some meaningful change rather than just some of the surface level stuff that we talked about. So we've covered the power of self-compassion. This is about developing those deep roots to cultivate change within you. Instead of pushing hard to fix yourself, effective change involves cultivating compassion for your struggles and imperfections. And like I said, wellness gurus sometimes frame change as something to achieve or conquer. But in reality, as you found out in this episode, it's about understanding yourself first and being kind to yourself throughout the process. Your patterns and your motivations are going to be very different to other people. So you've got to get deep. You've got to get inside of yourself, and you've got to be able to have that safe place to land when you eventually relapse, because I guarantee you that you will. And if you're able to do that without beating yourself up, you're much more likely to get back onto the horse if you've already got that soil of self-compassion within you. The next thing that we've covered is external versus internal change. Wellness advice often focuses on external changes like habits, diets, or routines. And whilst these are important, it's those internal shifts, how you think, how you feel, how you view yourself, and what some of those self-concepts are, along with the belief patterns and your conditioning. These are what, when you shift them and when you start to change them, if they're disempowering, they are what make external changes sustainable in the long run. And next, we've covered a lot of ground, and a lot of the episode has been focused on that emotional work being key. And it is, because change isn't just about action or steps or new habits. It's about emotional growth and understanding, and addressing the emotions tied to old patterns, fears, and beliefs is the most crucial step. But what many wellness approaches skim over this, focusing on external actions instead. I want to encourage you to keep doing that deep emotional work, even if it's painful, even if it's uncomfortable, because remember, discomfort doesn't equal danger. If you're feeling uncomfortable, you are at the exact spot of where you need to be. That is where you need to be placing all of your attention, because it's uncomfortable for a reason. It's like you're picking at a scab that needs to be looked at, because that is the thing that is operating as an undercurrent out of your awareness. So if you want to change on the outside, you've got to do the emotional work on the inside. And so now you should have an idea for uncovering deep-rooted patterns by some of the materials and questions that I've given you. A lot of people seek a lot of the change that people seek actually involves digging into their past, their unconscious patterns and childhood experiences. A lot of people focus on the here and now and the simple solutions, but they fail to address how these patterns show up in our daily lives and need to be reworked for meaningful transformation. But for those of you who are struggling right now, I want to leave you with this. The problematic stuff that you're experiencing right now on the inside is a well-established pattern. And for a pattern to be present, it needs something to happen in a repeated or regular way. In this case, for many of you listening to this, your patterns of your beliefs, your perceptions, your thoughts are all anchored to the same feelings, which delivers the same predictable result in your life. By again, the pattern of how you continue to respond to yourself when you have those feelings. And the key to being unstuck is knowing what part of the pattern you're repeating. Because freedom doesn't lie in establishing new repetitive habits, but in deeply understanding and repetitively disrupting your existing ones. And this is the format and the framework that I've used to produce the Braver Women Journal. And a lot of people have said to me, but I don't have any new thoughts each day, so why would I keep writing down new beliefs? And what I say to them is because you need to keep challenging the existing ones. And that's the premise behind the design of that. So if you haven't had a look at the Braver Women Journal, it is not about establishing new thoughts each day. It's about understanding and repetitively disrupting your existing thought patterns to create some change within you. I'll put a link for the journal in the show notes. But for now, it's been quite an episode. Let me know what you found helpful in this episode. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I want to connect with you more and more. I'm going to put the links on how to join the Braver Women Facebook community in the show notes. I'm going to put the link on how to contact me if you have a question or an idea for me to cover. One of the next episodes that I'm going to do for you is how to help you know how to help you understand and know when you need professional help, because deep work on your own independently and without support is quite a task. And I want to be able to give you some signposts to understand when you need to just put your hand up and say, look, I could do with some help here, so you can understand what's going on inside of you. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to be back in another week with another episode. I'll give you a teaser of what that is. It's going to be involving someone quite remarkable in the LGBTQ plus community, Al Start, who's recently been on Britain's Got Talent. I'm not going to say any more than that for now, but I want you to tune into the podcast next week. And if you're not a member of the Braver Women Facebook group, then what are you doing? What are you waiting for? Get in. You're not going to find content like that anywhere. It's a therapeutic community. It's a safe place to share your thoughts, to learn. I post content in there regularly to help you, and some members have found it life-changing. And lastly, if you haven't subscribed to the Braver Women podcast show, do so now. I don't want you to miss out on any more episodes. If you enjoyed this episode or you have really enjoyed other episodes, I want to hear about it. If you're happy to, leave me a review. The more feedback that I get, the more that I can keep refining and creating things that are going to help you. So I'm going to say take care, pick something from this episode to focus on, try it and let me know. And above all, keep showing up with courage. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.